This is going to, I think, they're going to be the most interesting of the three panels because this is the actionable end of all this stuff. Specifically, I think we want to talk about social media, how to use it, what it does, what it doesn't do, and who is most likely to be influenced. Can we hold it down in the corner here, please, just for a second, folks?
Sheila's fault.
Excuse me, Sheila. Could we hold it down just a little bit? Thank you. So why don't we start with everybody introducing themselves for a couple of minutes apiece, and then we'll get into it.
Sure. My name's Anton. I'm with Google. I've been with them for about 2 years. I work primarily on the issue advocacy and political campaign advertising team based out of Washington, D.C. So in 2012, we worked with presidential candidates, with Senate candidates, agencies on their online advertising. And we worked with them on, if you think about the 3 M's of campaigns and advocacy, message, or money, message, and mobilization. So we help them fundraise online. We help them get their message out on persuasion online, and then help mobilize voters and at the end of the cycle there. I've been with Google for 2 years. Before that, worked with America's Natural Gas Alliance, doing external affairs in the advocacy space in DC. So that's another area that we work with a lot of clients based out of like DC trade associations and issue advocacy groups on getting their message out to folks that they're trying to persuade in states. Before that, worked with Republican campaigns on the East Coast. So kind of my background fit really well into this new Google position where we're working with campaigns more often on their online marketing.
Sean?
Sean Noble. I'm the president of a company called DC London. Does political consulting and advocacy work. We're a big customer of Google. We spend a lot of time doing issue advocacy work on the online space. Actually, Rich and I go pretty far back. I was just a kid when I met Rich and learned at his knee. He was, if you don't know this about Rich Galen, he was the original blogger with, and he may have said this before, with Mullings. Used to be faxed to people. So I was inspired by his words and his wisdom and stayed in the political scene and really delved into the social media side of it, which is where our firm does a lot of work in social media engagement. I don't personally do it as much. I mean, I have some followers and I go on Facebook and that kind of thing, but I'm the old guy on the panel, so, well, Rich.
Thank you for bringing that up. I can't tell you how much. We also, Sean and I also have something in common. We both worked for John Shattuck of Arizona. Sean was chief of staff, right? And in the campaign as well. And John was the chairman of GOPAC when I was there, so we have that in common. A very talented guy. He was a pleasure to work with.
My name is Chad Barth. I'm the manager for politics and government at a company called Eventbrite. We're a 7-year-old tech startup based out of San Francisco, and I kind of handle our, much like Anton, handle our DC outreach and into campaigns and issue advocacy groups. Before that, I spent almost 8 years at the Republican National Committee building up grassroots field-level technology platforms like Voter Vault and the Victory VoIP phone bank centers. And then before that, I spent 4 years at the wonderful Republican Party of Iowa.
My name is Jim Anderson, and I love Chad Barth's orange socks and orange suede shoes. I don't know if anybody can see that.
Well, we got socks down here, too, you want to put in the running.
Oh, yeah, they're nice.
Yeah.
I work at a company called Whole Crowd, which is a social media engagement and management software. We work primarily with issue advocacy campaigns and political campaigns and corporations to help grow their social media brand, grow an online crowd of supporters for their brand and for their issues. And prior to that, I was at the Republican National Committee. I also have spent some time at the state party in Iowa and have done handfuls of campaigns all over the country.
The issues that we started out with a definition with the first panel of what big data is and how you collect it, how you deal with it. And the second panel was more practical applications of using it. This time we're going to, I think, try to focus a little bit more on what individual campaigns, individual associations, whoever, how they can make use of it, especially in what's now called the social media space. As I described earlier, I have a Facebook page with 5,000 friends because I thought it was a contest to get the most friends, and I only know about 27 of them. I'm unclear about who the rest of them are, and I don't care now. But what I didn't tell you was that I also have 4,000 followers on Twitter, and I don't have to accept them, they just show up. But what I did with Twitter and with Facebook, I don't go to my Facebook page almost ever because, again, I don't know who's on it and I don't know what they're talking about, nor do I care. But what I do is when I write Mullings, which is 3 times a week, Sunday night for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I put a link on Twitter to that to my mullings.com page, and that feeds my Facebook page. And what I found out was when I started doing that, the page views went up almost 17% on Mullings, that people who otherwise didn't know it was there found it on one of those 2 platforms, and it had a real live, no kidding around, positive impact on that little business that I call Mullings. So using that as a starting off point, why don't we just go down the line and talk about what people should be looking for when they're trying to put together a Facebook, Twitter, whatever other media are available to them for either their campaign or their district or an association. Let's start it at this end, Anton.
Sure. I think you covered 2 of the big ones, Facebook and Twitter. I know Facebook's speaking later. I can talk a little bit about some of the Google things that I've seen from different advocacy groups and different campaigns. So there's 2 great tools that we've seen a lot of organizations use with Google. One of them is YouTube. So some folks know this. Google owns YouTube. It's the 2nd largest search engine, I believe, behind Google. So when you're going to Google, you're looking for content, you read things. You go to YouTube, you're looking for video. So a lot of the organizations we work with are pushing out a lot of video content, right? A lot of the DC groups put a lot of money behind creating a new video. They get it professionally produced. They get it onto their YouTube channel, and then they just assume people are going to watch it because,
Tell us what a YouTube channel is.
So a YouTube channel is where it's a video hosting platform. So it's where these organizations are placing their videos for their brand. So the Chamber of Commerce, the American Petroleum Institute, any of these organizations have a YouTube page. They're uploading videos, and they want people to see these videos. What I've seen with this is you talk about social metrics, and there's Facebook's like, there's Twitter followers. I think YouTube views and YouTube subscribers fall into that as well. So whenever we talk to our clients, we also, we want them to think of video as a social strategy for a lot of them because it is an area where we are driving a huge audience on YouTube. And the other side of it for Google is, Google Plus as a platform. Outside of you'd use Facebook and Twitter differently, Google Plus is pretty large on the Hangout side. So both presidential campaigns used Hangouts in 2012 to connect personally with voters. And what a Hangout is a video conference with President Obama or candidate Romney at the time. And 10 people would jump onto this video conference and have personal interactions. So those are 2 of the kind of social things we've been working on for these.
So I think the way I look at it is one of the things that the reasons to do social media, to do Twitter, to do Facebook, to do Google Plus, those kind of things, is to figure out how you can personally, be in touch with somebody. I mean, after the last election, all of us in the political world were, going through the whole navel gazing of, what did we do wrong? How did we get beat so badly? What were the great advances that were done by the left, by the Obama campaign? Yes, they had good technology. We had good technology. We have very smart people that do a lot of this stuff on our side, and you've heard from a lot of them today. Ultimately, and I said this at a panel at Campaign Tech, at the end of the day, you could have completely unplugged Obama's campaign. They could have used paper walkbooks and still beat us. And the reason is because they had so many people on the ground. Ultimately, the digital revolution, technology, social media doesn't do a hill of beans of good unless there's actual people behind it. And those people have influence on others. It goes back to an old adage, and Rich will appreciate this. There was one of the premier campaign guys in our history was a guy named Steve Shattuck. He ran Barry Goldwater's campaign for Senate in 1952.
Wrote the book, literally.
Wrote the book, How to Win an Election, in the early 1960s. And literally, the book is the textbook. It still works today. You can apply it to personal contact through social. But his point was, I mean, he got Goldwater elected in Arizona in 1952. Goldwater was running against the sitting Senate president, so what would have been Harry Reid, in a state that was 5-1 Democrat advantage registration-wise. And he did it building social precincts. He said, yeah, we all live in these political precincts, but we don't have as much interaction with our neighbors as we do with the people we go to church with, go to the club with, work with, socialize with. And so he talked about building the social precinct, and that's how you influence people. Well, we can do that digitally now. And so as long as the Facebook page and the Twitter page or Twitter feed and those things are built at trying to communicate to those that have influence over a large number of people, then that's really what the goal of a campaign should be, because it's all about personal interaction. The more advanced we get, the more personalized I think it has to become.
Yeah, I think one of the great things that I was able to do when I worked at the Republican National Committee is like find new ways to use technology to bring more data into our ecosystem, whether that was through collecting walk sheets or phone calls through a telephone as opposed to having to scan things in or what might have you. But social media is really now driving a lot of this data collection in so many different parts of what a campaign or a state party or an organization can do. You look at the Eventbrite platform as a whole. Eventbrite, for those of you that don't know, is this online ticketing and event registration platform. It allows you as a county party leader or a candidate, somebody who's running a local organization, a gun club, or whatever you might be helping organize an event for, to really drive this online interaction to offline engagement. It's why we're all here today, at the Mackinac conference, because we want to be around like-minded people that share some passion about the same interests that we do. And what we're able to do now, because of tie-ins with Google and Twitter and Facebook, and all of those platforms are kind of just naturally baked into the Eventbrite platform, allows us to find new people coming to events because they're sharing it with their friends that, yeah, you may not know them, but they're finding out because of their other friends that are posting online, whether it be through Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or just sharing it via email and saying, I'm going to this event, do you want to come with us? And we see event organizers, especially in the political and nonprofit space, that are finding new people coming into these events that they had never known before. In the case of the Romney campaign, and we can talk more about this as this panel goes on, but in the case of the Romney campaign, they had tested using the Eventbrite platform just to ticket everybody who's coming to a free campaign rally in June, and they would find 70% of new people coming into their events that they had never had on any of their lists ever. And they did that just because they asked them to pre-register to come into this event, as opposed to every other presidential campaign that I've been a part of, and even the Obama campaign this year was still asking people to fill out, or this past year was still asking them to fill out a paper card saying, I came to this event.
Jim?
I agree with everything the gentlemen up here have said. I think one of the first things that a campaign or a state party will do is go create a Twitter account and go create a Facebook page. It's really about what they do next, right? I mean, everybody knows now that you've got to have these tools to communicate with people, but being able to take that next step and start, and Sean mentioned this and he's absolutely right, being able to engage with the right people with the right message. And there's a lot of tools out there that help organizations and campaigns and state parties do that. But once a candidate or a state party, a county party sets up their Facebook page and they start increasing likes and they start knowing who their crowd is, they need to go out and start finding more people, because every day people take to Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and post something, right? I mean, every time somebody sends a tweet or uploads a photo to Instagram, I mean, they're expressing their opinion one way or another. And for candidates, campaigns, state parties to be able to capture that information and start engaging with those people on a one-on-one level and building that relationship. Because in advocacy, whether it's a campaign to elect a candidate or whether it's an issue advocacy fight, it's all about that personal engagement and the personal relationship. The more you can talk to that person, the more they're going to come into your universe. And when you do make that call to action, whether it's for a donation or to get somebody to vote, they're much more likely to do it because they have invested their time in engaging with you and engaging in that conversation. So I think everything everybody said up here is absolutely right, and it's really about the direct engagement and finding the right people and growing your online crowd outside of the likes that you have and the followers that you have.
This is an extreme case, but it's going to get to the question I want to ask. I was in Morocco earlier this year with an NGO, and we were working with women members of the legislature, of the national legislature, who were given the worst districts to run in because the men were controlling the districts, of course. And we were being very, very smart, and Morocco is a very sophisticated country, and we were saying, well, you need to set up Facebook accounts and Twitter. And they said, well, first of all, we don't have computers in my district. We don't have electricity in a lot of my districts, and the illiteracy rate amongst women is about 90%. So what other good ideas do you have? So, well, okay, so to get back to this area, there are pockets in the country where broadband is not ubiquitous. There are demographics in both vertically and horizontally where computer usage is not nearly what it is amongst young people, where a smartphone is just something that you gave to your dad or your mom because you had to give them something for Christmas. They don't know what to do with it. They keep trying to press a button, and there aren't any buttons. Let's talk a little bit about the demographic skew to these tools and how we can help overcome them, knowing that there is also a probably transverse demographic skew to the Republican Party.
Sure. Well, I think that there's clearly a demographic skew. I mean, older people are less likely to be online or on their mobile devices. It's more than you'd expect. I mean, some of the research, and these guys have it, is pretty amazing. I went into the 2012 cycle thinking that we were going to just have to do all kinds of different stuff to communicate with seniors other than the digital side. But that is not necessarily true. I mean, there's a lot of them that are very engaged on social media. And it's mainly because they're looking at pictures of their grandkids. I mean, they get the Facebook page because they want to see the pictures that all their kids have out there. And so, there's really cool ways that you can advertise to people who care about their kids. I mean, we were running ads in Ohio blaming Obama for the economy, and isn't it terrible that the economy sucks so bad that your son had to move his family out of state? And, just trying to play on that emotional tug. And running it.
Or worse yet, had to move them into your basement.
Well, that could be worse. That's right. But so there's ways to use the technology to target particular people. But there's always going to be, I think, it's never going to be 100% of people are going to be able to use these tools. So there's always going to be direct mail. There's always going to be phone calls. In fact, I've often wondered 5 years from now, what are we going to be saying? Because it could be that that there's a privacy backlash. I mean, we know so much about people. It's ridiculous how much we know about people. If they knew how much we knew about them, it'd scare them to death. I mean, when if you click on an app on Facebook, you're just giving us tons of great data. And we're going to use that to follow you all over the place and advertise very specifically to you. And at some point that may change. I've always said, direct mail guys will say, well, nobody likes my business. They're all going to digital, that kind of thing. I said, at the end of the day, no matter what happens in the digital world, everyone's going to have an address. So mail will always be a part of the campaign. And that's the thing, is that we can't look at the digital revolution and say it's going to replace the way that campaigns are run. It's going to make them more sophisticated, more targeted. But at the end of the day, we have to communicate with people in a way that they personally can be influenced. And sometimes with some people, that's a mail piece. That may be a 4-page letter. It might be an email. So it's not just digital, but clearly that has transformed the way that we. Digital has made us all more attuned to being more personalized in the way that we communicate and try to persuade.
What's Google, Anton? How's Google dealing with this type of issue?
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's a couple things Sean said. One is. I 100% agree that it's important to evaluate your marketing strategy, your campaign strategy, and figure out where you have holes and what you need to cover with those holes. So if it's direct mail and that works for a certain demographic, and you tested some digital and maybe direct mail was working better or whatnot. I've always talked to our folks on the campaign and advocacy side that you should have a consistent message across multiple screens or multiple marketing mechanisms. So if you're driving direct mail to a certain demographic, they should also have that option to see it online. And if you look at some of the statistics behind YouTube, and I actually found this surprising working at Google, the reach with baby boomers and even 35 to 55 on YouTube as well is just a little bit under 18 to 24-year-olds. So for me, it was a pretty remarkable statistic that we do have the reach, and people are using Facebook to see their grandkids' photos. They're going to YouTube to watch a vacation video that was uploaded. Something that I think people should focus on, I think Ryan might have mentioned it in the previous panel, was creating specific content though for these different demographics. And it's important for advocacy groups or campaigns to figure out what message is resonating with 65 plus, rather than kind of blanketing the whole area with the same message for everyone. I think that's kind of the area for opportunity for folks in this space.
Jim, how are you guys dealing with the demographic, if there is a demographic disconnect?
Sure, yeah, I think Anton just hit on it. And content is really key when it comes to communicating with somebody, right? You need to know what to say, when to say it, but even more importantly, how to say it. What's the tone that you're talking with somebody about? And one of the things we do at Whole Crowd is we really try and work with every client, whether it's a candidate, whether it's a state party, or an issue campaign, to say, look, we're able to understand what people are saying. Not only are we able to understand what people are saying, we're able to understand what gets them to move. So anytime a message is sent out to somebody, you're essentially following them. I mean, Sean mentioned it earlier, we can follow people wherever they go with data. That's one of the best things. I mean, data is not changing campaigns, it's really sharpening the campaigns. I mean, being able to say, hey, Chad, I know when Chad clicked on this link from the message we sent him, I know where he went on your website. I know if he didn't click on the donate button, well, then maybe the donate language that we sent him, it may be off. So not only that, but being able to say that, I think one of the panels earlier was talking about sentiment monitoring. Sentiment monitoring is great. I mean, being able to say what's being said negatively or positively about your issue, but being able to break that down even more by gender and age. One of the things we do at Whole Crowd is utilizing our crowd mood. We can tell any client at any time, what are females saying in a positive tone about this issue. And why is that helpful? Because it's helpful if you go to Google and you run an ad and you're going to target women, you really want to know what they're saying, whether it's a positive or negative tone, because creating that right message, again, and sending it to the right person is the best way to do the advocacy.
Oh, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think the one thing that most campaigns have tried to start adopting, and companies now today too, is really making sure that everything that they produce content-wise is all dedicated towards mobile viewing options, right? Everything has to be done to be optimized for mobile. If it's signing up for an event or watching a video or looking at an ad, if it's not being optimized for mobile, it's going to get lost in the fray very quickly. If you look at like a lot of the content or messaging that would get put out by the Obama campaign back in 2008, and then of course here in 2012, a lot of that was getting picked up in minority districts and people that weren't as affluent still on their smartphone. That was a huge driver of content awareness for everybody, was being able to look at it on their Android device, their iPhone, whether it was prepaid or they were in a 2-year contract for that device. And so that has been like a really big push for a lot of organizations to make sure that everything that they produce is all mobile optimized. And if you don't, you will end up losing that ability to reach people, I think, in the years to come, or months even.
Yeah, there's data that suggests very strongly that for minorities, a much higher percentage of minorities get their access to the internet from a phone or a mobile device than they do from a laptop sitting at home, because they don't have a laptop sitting at home. They may not have broadband service into their home, but over wireless technology, they can be anywhere to get it. So that's a group that we know is getting their information somewhat differently. But let's talk specifically about young people. That maybe you disagree with this, but young people are not the core of the Republican Party, even if they may be generally conservative. Either they're afraid to say it, like being a Hollywood actor and saying you're a Republican. People just don't want to do that. So how do we use these tools to attract young people and get them into the mix and get them comfortable being identified with the Republican Party specifically and conservatism generally?
Well, I think conservatism is easier than the Republican Party right now. It's an image thing. I tell people that everyone says, well, we got to fix the brand. Well, we're not going to fix the brand until we have the White House. I mean, we're good at destroying the brand, and then we have to wait for someone to get elected president that's a Republican that can then fix the brand. That, you know, Nixon destroyed it. Carter took that up, and then Carter destroyed his brand. Reagan got elected, and then actually made being a Republican something that everybody wanted to do. He didn't get elected because he was Republican. He got elected because he had a vision. And then, you know, H.W. destroyed that brand. Clinton gets there. Bush gets elected. W., you know, builds up the brand again, then destroys it. And so until we actually win the White House, we're not going to fix the brand. Because of that, I think we have to, that's where it comes into personal, when it comes to candidates, they've got to be able to be personally driven to connect with people, and particularly young people, because that's where things are going. And I think that, I mean, I have a lot of young people that work for me, so I don't really quite understand them. But it is, they are very driven, you know, the 20-somethings and early 30-somethings right now are very driven, and they're not...
Ideologically driven?
Yeah, I think they're ideologically driven, but it's really, they all tend to have kind of a sense of purpose, more so I think than my generation or older to some degree. But the way to communicate with them, I think, is all visual. I mean, you talked about video. I mean, that's the one thing that if there's anything that changed between 2008 and 2012, it was the amount of content that was created, particularly video content. I mean, the viewership of video online is just, you know, continuing to just balloon. And like in the 2008 cycle, a typical advocacy effort, independent expenditure, or campaign effort would probably produce a couple dozen ads total, you know, in the course of the election. We, just in the presidential level stuff that we were working on in the independent expenditure space, we created 130 different ads in the presidential election because there were so many different ways to target that in the online space. And kids tend to be very visual, and so if you can't just post a Facebook post with words, you got to do some visuals with it, because that's where you're going to get some reaction.
Somebody in the last panel was talking about the fact, Greg from CompuWare was saying that their studies show that a Twitter feed that includes a video is 70 times or something, 20 times more likely to be retweeted than just 140 very clever characters by me.
Even if clever words written by you.
I think the one thing that we seem to always get kind of lost in this idea of like, how do we bring in more young people into the party? Is technology the way to do it? And it can help us get there to an extent, right? It will help us better reach people that are more educated in using technology. But I think, like Anton and I probably have a different experience from working, Anton working at Google and myself now working at Eventbrite in San Francisco. When I go back to San Francisco, it's like totally different than when I worked at the RNC. The RNC is this very like structured building. Everybody has their own office or their own cube. And you go to a place like the Google campus, or you go to Eventbrite, and it's all open, right? Everybody is collaborating with each other because they are sitting literally like 2 feet away from each other and across from each other. And I think the sense of like the party apparatus, or the message in which we have as a party, is not always resonating to them, because it's very, they're working in a big box, and they are very purpose driven. But the purpose being driven for them is it's one of economics first and foremost, because they're working at a startup company and they're hoping that at some point in time that that company takes off and it goes public and they have this big payday, right? They get lost in the social issues very quickly, I think, for right or wrong. So it's very much kind of a very kind of libertarian, like, stay out of my life, let me go make my money, let me go do my thing, type of mentality, at least in the Valley. I don't know, Anton, you might think differently of that, but I think it's really about the way in which we communicate it with that core group. You'll see members of Congress or elected officials that want to engage in social media, connections with folks, but all they do is take their entire press release and they post it on Facebook, or they take a 6,000 word press release and they post it in Twitter.
Right.
You're not being genuine in that fact if you like your entire Twitter feed is now filled up with 52 messages or 52 posts that combine up to your aggregate press release. So it's about like being able to be genuine in how you're using the media channels and not just letting it be a one-way communication effort. It shouldn't just be pushed out to them. That's a press release. That's a hard copy press release. Social media is there to be engaging with people, and that's why people will post a photo or they'll post a video to try and engage with the people that they're trying to reach. And if you don't do that, it's just very disingenuous at that point in time.
Yeah, I've got to agree with Chad on that. And let's take a step back, and you started this question by saying when you post a video inside of a tweet, it gets X amount more retweets or likes or favorites or whatever. There's a reason for that, right? I mean, why are people retweeting it? Why are people mentioning it? Why are they clicking on the link of your video? And Sean mentioned this earlier. I mean, visualizations are much better to the younger demographic. I mean, infographics are huge now. Why is that? Because people can look at an infographic in 30 seconds and understand a story. They can watch a 30-second video and understand a candidate's message. So I think the overall conversation about how do we get younger demographics into the Republican Party is one that we could probably sit up here for days talking about. I think the shorter answer is being able to utilize tools like we're all talking about up here. The great thing about the young demographic is that they're all over these social media platforms, right? I mean, Instagram. We've got some universities that are clients of ours, and they use Instagram like it's going out of style because everybody in their school is doing it.
Talk about that a little bit. Instagram is a photo posting.
Yeah, it's a photo sharing social media platform where anybody can upload a photo. You can apply hashtags to it. You could say, hey, I'm sitting here on this panel and I'm uploading a photo as I'm doing it. Hashtag Mackinac. And for us, we're able to enter the right keywords, and for our universities, find students that are uploading a photo with an acceptance letter saying, I got into this university, I'm so excited, I can't wait. Well, the universities are in real time utilizing Whole Crowd's platform, responding to that student and saying, we can't wait to have you. Go to this website for a list of everything you need on day one. That's how you start talking to people. Right. And if you're a candidate, I think Sean mentioned this earlier, I mean, the message to young demographics is about exactly that. It's about the message. What are we saying to them? How often are we saying it to them? Are we saying it to them in the right tone? And I think a lot of that has to come from our candidates.
Let's talk about the candidate side of this a little bit. A lot of candidates, and we all know them, or we've all worked with them, or people like them, are afraid of some of these things because they can't control it as well. I mean, as we all know in politics, what you want to do is take something with the least possible risk with the highest possible reward, which is why candidates love advertising. You know what it's going to say, you know what it's going to look like, you know where it's going to be placed, you know how often, and hate debates because that is completely out of your control. It's a very high risk and potentially low return endeavor. But so for a lot of candidates, they can't control the replies to Twitter. They can't control as well what people are going to cross-post on their Facebook page. So how do we help them understand better that the rewards are far more than the risk, if we think that's true?
Well, I do believe it's true. I think, as I look, because I worked for a congressman for 14 years, and what was interesting is you're very right about the want to do the lowest risk thing with the highest reward. Ultimately, the best thing that a congressman can do to persuade someone is actually have a conversation with someone. And that's why town halls, as painful as they can be, they're usually actually pretty good. I mean, sometimes if a congressman loses a temper or something and that gets picked up on a video and then that becomes an issue. But if you can be disciplined and be out there and answering the tough questions, then there's no difference if you post something on Facebook and you're going to face, I see this all the time, a senator will post something on their Facebook and then they just get barraged with negative comments but that's interaction. And if you can kind of go back and forth, you may not persuade that person who you're interacting with, but you're certainly going to be persuading the people who are watching that. Just like in a town hall, we've all seen it. Somebody will berate the elected official, he'll answer, he'll try to be calm, and ultimately the crowd turns against the jerk who's yelling at him. Well, that's the same kind of thing. I mean, it's just in a different space. ultimately, I think what we have to teach our candidates, and this is why I will never be a candidate, is that you just have to deal with it. I mean, you have to take the arrows. You got to have thick enough skin that you can get in the game, you know, do that kind of thing. I would never do that because I've watched it up close, but I am really happy that there's great people who will be elected officials because we need good people that are elected officials. But they need to be willing to take risks and be themselves. And if they're not, I mean, the problem is if they're too packaged, then they'll come across that way, and we don't, you know, they're not going to last very long in this day and age.
Anton?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think Sean's absolutely right. There's a fine line between, you know, not responding at all and what that means for your brand or your candidate, and then going into too much back and forth and who looks, you know, bad when when it blows up and you start having an argument with someone in the crowd. In a non-political or advocacy space, you know, I've seen it when I've complained about something on Twitter. Maybe like, you know, a taxi service messed something up and I tweeted at them. They're very quick to respond and apologize and say, you know, it was our fault. You know, send me a direct message or email me and we'll figure it out. Same with, you know, Comcast does things like this. I think Domino's does too. So all these brands are now, it's all about participation and making sure that you're engaging with those folks that are reaching out to you and saying something. And you know, Sean's right, there's gonna be people that are there just to heckle and to you know, make a scene, but for the most part, people just want answers. So I think the worst thing you can do is just not respond to any type of criticism.
Well, and you heard Ryan Mearstein say in the last panel, there was like 2 big moments during the Romney campaign that they only caught because they were bubbling up through social media, and they were able to quickly respond back to those and get out in front of those.
What were those two for the people that weren't?
It was
Hillary
One was the
Rosen,
Etch-a-Sketch.
and then Rosen.
and then the Rosenberg comment about Ann Romney never, you know, having a real job.
Oh, right.
And so those types of moments, if you're not participating and you're not watching into those platforms, they will quickly overtake you as a candidate or even in a PR sense. And I think you've even seen a few, you know, major, you know, Fortune 50 companies like almost get to that point where they're about ready to get deluged by public sentiment because they didn't do something and they weren't responding back to it, and they were able to kind of mitigate it because of, you know, using and monitoring social media.
And that does work right for somebody running for city council as well as.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it works for anybody across the board. The thing with candidates is a lot of times it's hard to get them out of their comfort zone because they know what they know, and getting into social media is a risk for some of them. On the campaign side, you know, a lot of times risks pay off. I'm a risk taker, so I would encourage candidates to take those steps and be aggressive on social media because as Anton and Chad just mentioned, you know, these Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies that are responding to you in real time, you know, there's a reason they're very successful in Fortune 150 companies. It's because they know what they're doing. They know that brand awareness is very important in being able to talk to your customer, whether it's a voter or an actual consumer, you know, is where we are these days. I mean, social media is very powerful, and to be able to respond to somebody in real time, whether it's a candidate or a business, is a very powerful thing.
I mean, if Chuck Grassley can send out, you know, like constant tweets from a volleyball game, Chuck Grassley, the senator from Iowa, if he can use Twitter, anybody can use Twitter.
Yeah.
And he actually
does it
tweets
as
everyone
himself,
himself.
right?
That's right. He is a self-tweeter, and the guy goes out, and sometimes you need like a deciphering book to figure out what it is he's actually saying, but he can use
Abbreviates
Twitter and use it very well and give you great volleyball and women's basketball game updates. for the
And he's
University
80.
of Northern Iowa.
Yeah, but it makes him real. I mean, that's
Yeah,
the
that's
thing.
right.
He's beloved because of it, you know.
My first big-time campaign, by the way, was in Iowa. In the 1980 cycle, it was Chuck Grassley was a congressman, and a guy named John Culver was the incumbent Democratic senator. And we had a primary. My candidate was the former state party chairman. His name was Tom Stoner. And we lost so badly that I had to get out of Iowa quickly. And happily, a young congressman from Huntington, Indiana, was looking for a press secretary, and that's how I got started with Dan Quayle, because he hired me for his Senate race. But we did have our moments in Iowa. The one thing that was good about Iowa, for me, I wish I was smart enough to have figured this out, but it was only after the fact that I realized it, is that in a presidential year, as we all know, every reporter in the country is in Iowa for some period of time in the presidential cycle. And because we had a statewide campaign, we would go to every event. There's not much going on in Iowa in the wintertime, so even the B'nai B'rith will come to the pork roast in Sioux City. So I got to meet all these guys when we were all younger, obviously, 4 younger then. Now they're all retiring, they've been bureau chiefs. But those sorts of things now, we didn't have anything that even resembled the internet, much less social media. So it was all done really by telephone, mostly by telephones. And we had those, the cell phones were the Saving Private Ryan, big things that weighed about 5 pounds. But nowadays, in talking about using social media, before we go any further, somebody asked if you would explain Google+.
Yes, I can talk about it now, or I'm actually speaking right after this, and I'll have it on.
Okay, fine.
Quick
In that
demo.
case,
So,
whoever asked that question, hang around, and we'll get that answered. But let's talk about the transition, not from 1980, because none of you guys remember that, but even like 5 or 6, 7 years ago, that these changes have come into place. And where do you see all this going over the next 2 or 3 years, if we can think that far ahead? Wow. Twitter didn't exist 4 years ago, right?
I think where we've come over the last 5 or 6 or 8 years, 2 presidential cycles, is phenomenal. I mean, from where we were in the 2004 cycle to where we are sitting here today, there's so many more ways to communicate with your constituents, with your potential voters, with donors. And candidates are, I think, every 2 years, every 4 years, are starting to learn that more and more. I think as our national committees are starting to learn that more and more, and having smart people part of those conversations in the committees is fantastic. And where is it going? I think, we talked, I think 2 panels ago, was big data. Being able to understand what it means when somebody sends a tweet, what they're saying, taking that information, those 141 characters, and applying it to not only a message back to them, but turning that person into a voter. So rather than just looking at a voter file, being able to put social data on top of that and understand what gets this person to click on a link. I mean, somebody is moved, somebody's always moved somehow, right? So if I send them a message and they click on it, being able to understand that data, but really understand it. I mean, why did that person click? Why did they not get to the poll to vote for my candidate? Was it something we said? So analyzing everything that's said on social media and applying it to what the ultimate goal is, whether it's an issue campaign or whether it's a candidate running for office, I think is where it's going.
My first campaign in Iowa was in the 1999 cycle. That I was actually getting paid as a staffer working at the Republican Party of Iowa. And I remember back then we had one computer in our office at the Iowa GOP that had the only voter file in the state for the party, right? And it was run on this platform called GeoVoter, and you had to have like this special block thing that was attached to the computer just to make it run. And to run a precinct walk file, it literally took probably an hour just to crank through 500 voters. And you could literally hear the hard drive just going the entire time as it produced this really crappy walk book. So to think about like where...
Are they still using it?
No, they don't use that anymore. I think unfortunately I put the company out of business a few years back with a little thing called Voter Vault. But the advent of seeing where that came from, and then 2 years later to having just kind of the start of this online voter file process or voter database process that we had at the RNC called Voter Vault at the time, to seeing like when I started at the committee in late 2003, we had maybe 1,000 people using the platform. And we took it, 4 years later to having 25,000 people across the country using it from there. And the biggest thing that we had the problem back, I'll remember in 2004, after the election was over, everybody was complaining about the fact that we were forcing everybody to go and collect all the information from every, phone call and door knock that we did. And it was so painful to get it back in because you had to type everything back into an Excel spreadsheet and upload it into this database that took hours to run. And so the next year we said, all right, well, we'll try and solve that problem. And then we came out with bubble scanning. It's like, for your own like standardized tests, the bubble Scantron forms. And so we came out with that. And all the victory offices across the country were using bubble scanning. What was the biggest complaint we heard after that? Didn't have enough time to scan all the pages in, right? Like all you needed was a 4-year-old to keep scanning, like feeding these sheets in here, and you could have gotten everything scanned in time. But apparently we didn't have enough, manpower for that. So then 2 years later, we come out with, voice over internet phones, and they're able to key the responses right into the phones. Like, who would have ever thought then, like all of a sudden Facebook would come around and Google and Twitter. Who's to say what's going to come up? But like, what's going to come up next? I think the thing that we strive, we always strive to do after any party, especially like this election where everybody was talking about technology and data, is we want to be very quick to respond back to the other side or the reason why we lost or whatever the case might be. So what everyone talks about then is like, we got to go build X, right? And we got to keep building X until we produce X, Y, and Z. And we can build 1,000 apps in the next 60 days. But A, if it didn't really have a purpose in which to help us win an election, or B, we don't have the folks on the ground trained to actually use those applications, they were just a waste of time and money. I've become good friends with Catherine Bracey, who was the tech office leader for the Obama campaign in San Francisco. And they were tasked with a bunch of projects from the Chicago headquarters to go out and build all these great apps and platforms and things like that to use. And she said the most depressing moment that I found in the campaign was 30 days before the campaign when we stopped building everything and everything was on cruise control from a tech perspective. She got deployed to somewhere in Colorado, and she walks into this office that should be like the technological nerve center in Colorado. And they're all using paper and pens and paper and everything. And she goes, nobody had spent the time to train them how to use these tools, so they just went back to the old like 3x5 note card voter lists. Mm-hmm. And so that's the thing that we can get too quickly caught up when it comes to like using technology, is that if you're not doing it for the right purpose and you're making it easy for people to use and you're training people how to use it, it will just get shoved into a desk drawer somewhere along the way.
You go.
Sure. So Chad's absolutely right on purpose. I agree with everything there. One thing that I've been thinking of recently and I've heard from other folks is, well, what's this going to look like in the future? And for 2012 and cycles before, digital was always was pretty siloed in my opinion. So it was, you had your communication shop, you had your political shop, you had your digital shop. And so they kind of worked on their own things. And what I think we'll see in the future, and maybe other panelists have mentioned this, is that digital then is now becoming more of a tool for each one of your different sectors of the campaign. So how does, you have fundraising, so you have major donors and small donors. Well, how does digital help you increase your fundraising? Then you have your political stuff, and you have to register voters, and you have to get them your message. Well, how does digital work into that political silo? And then you have communications. How can you use digital and rapid response? And I think for 2012, all of it was really siloed in one section. And the more we can integrate that across the campaign, I think the more successful we'll be in the future.
Needs to have a more holistic theme across all the departments of a campaign from top to bottom.
And that's part of what, the Obama campaign, what they actually did was they just did very good at integration of information. It wasn't that we didn't have that kind of information data, we just didn't have a way to integrate it the way they did. They thought very strategically about that for a long time. I think that that's going to naturally evolve so that we're going to not be behind the 8 ball in that kind of a situation in the future. I think where it's going is very, very much towards how do we use the social media data similar to the way we use voter lists. Right now, it's a pretty tough lift for us in a big way to take in a bunch of social media and then match it against a voter file. There's a lot of stuff that has to go on to make that happen. But if we can figure out, there's some great things that guys like Mark Kwame and Tim Estes and some others are doing that are coming out of the intelligence data world, now doing some stuff on the right in the political data world that I think are going to revolutionize the way some of this happens. It's as simple as if you have an app, if you have an iPhone and you've got a canvassing app loaded on it, you point your camera at the house and it'll tell you exactly, just by visualization, it'll tell you who's in the house and all the things that matter, and what it is that persuades them, and what should be your message to these people. And so it's taking the data, taking all the information we can gather about people, and then figuring out how to personally communicate with them, whether it's someone calling them on the phone, knocking on their door, or posting a message through Facebook or Twitter, that kind of thing. But it's ultimately, it's using technology to make campaigns more about one-on-one communication.
Or you could use Google Earth and just, it would follow you around the neighborhood and say, okay, now this guy. I'm a press guy. I'm not a organization guy or a fundraiser. I spent a couple of months helping Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell through some of his woes. And we had a major announcement that we wanted to do right after I'd started. And my concern was because the way reporters work these days, they're not writing for the deadline, the 8 o'clock deadline for the next morning's paper. They're blogging all day. So the drive to be the first reporter with a big story is constant for them. And I was concerned because the governor didn't have the best possible relationship with the press corps at that point, that I didn't want anybody to think I was showing favoritism. And because there's also a governor's race going on in the odd-numbered year, Virginia and New Jersey are the two states that elect governors in odd-numbered years. A lot of reporters aren't in their offices. They're not there to get a press release kind of in the traditional fashion where you'd send it to their email account and hopefully they'd be somewhere where they could get it. So what I decided to do was we opened a web page that was only there as a repository. It didn't have any content. It wasn't pretty, didn't have anything. It was just so I had something to link to on Twitter. And I sent a Twitter feed to everybody. We had everybody's Twitter as well as email addresses. So I tweeted out this announcement. So everybody got it essentially at the same time as a Twitter feed. And nobody complained about the fact that we gave it to the Post before the Virginian pilot got it or anything else. For me, that was the first time I've ever had to do that because I don't do much on the ground press stuff anymore. But I was amazed at how quickly that populated the entire blogosphere of reporters in Virginia because they all got it instantaneously. And for the most part, they just blogged the same bit.ly link that I'd put up on Twitter.
Well, it's clearly the way that I mean, I think that, and there's a great piece that was written, I can't remember who wrote it.
Peter Hamby.
Peter Hamby, yeah. Great piece on, did Twitter kill the boys on the bus? And
Right.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always going to be the need to have somebody that's got proximity to the candidate, particularly in a presidential election. But my goodness, the day of being able to, spike a story before it gets filed, that's over.
Yeah, that's right.
This is, which is going to change not only the way people run for office, it's going to change who runs for office. Because you're just going to have a different mindset going into this. You're not going to be able to be as a control. It's not as a controlled environment as it used to be.
Right,
it's
exactly.
very chaotic, and that's that dynamic destruction I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that by saying, campaigns and the way people communicate, especially inside of the digital world, the speed has increased tremendously. And Sean was mentioning earlier that they did 130 ads this cycle versus 20 or something a couple of cycles ago. I mean, that's just mainly because of social media. I mean, people are able to respond so quickly that you have to be able to react with the right message, whether it's an online ad or whether it's engaging with that person one-on-one, which is similar to the press release you're talking about. I mean, it's such a fast world now with digital media that having the right tools to be able to manage that is key.
Yeah, not from like a press side, but I remember when the weekend that Governor Romney had announced that Paul Ryan was going to be his running mate, I was in just outside of DC for a campaign rally over there, and as they were getting ready to come up from Norfolk up to this next rally, I got a call from Tad Rupp, who was handling their kind of the digital events team at the Romney campaign, and said, "Hey, bud, everybody else is dispersed out to all these other cities. We just decided we're going to do a homecoming rally with the governor and Congressman Ryan in the hometown in Wisconsin." And he's like, "Can you get on the plane after this event's over and go with me to show up at this event and to help manage it?" And I was like, "How many people are you expecting?" He's like, "I don't know, a couple thousand probably." And literally, they had announced the event, I think, like at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And by 8 o'clock that night, they had already had 8,000 people registering for this homecoming rally. And they were finding out about it because of social media. People were getting phone calls, but they're also sharing about that fact through Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, just email itself. And by the time that we had opened up the gates that day, it was a really hot Sunday afternoon, there was an additional like 4,000 people that had signed up, from the last check that we did the night before. And again, people just sharing about it. There was a line of traffic a mile long just to get to this, State Fairgrounds Exposition Center. And people were just like turning away because they were having to walk 2 miles to, park 2 miles away and then have to walk. So the way that social media is changing even, something as simple as an event or your press release, postings, or just the way that the candidate is communicating with people is fascinating. And all of it is just revolving around data, right? Being able to collect all that data that's coming back to it.
That's going to wrap up this segment. I hope this was as useful for you as it was for me. I want to thank everybody who's been here through one or more of these panels. Thanks for the great questions. Thanks for the attention, and have a wonderful evening. Thanks.